Well, good day, everybody. Welcome to the Lifetime Training Podcast. And I am super excited to bring you today one of our own, Miss Kelsey Martin. Kelsey is a certified trainer, precision nutrition certified, corrective exercise specialist. And one of the main topics we're going to talk about today is not only her story, but her passion in her specialization as it applies to women's physiology and training, specifically, the considerations, the hormone health and all of these different things and how we pull it all together to help females train the best way possible. So welcome to the show, Kelsey.
Welcome. Thanks for having me.
Man, I'm excited to bring you on. And, this is you have an amazing, amazing story. And again, something that's such a hot topic and most people don't understand is how do I train a female? Because, one of my mentors, Paul Check, who I'm going to have on a show soon, he wrote a course called Equal But Not the Same. And it was all about training females. And I can't believe that more and more, companies, people, certifications haven't really jumped on this, but it seems like they are.
Yeah, and it was something that I probably wouldn't have dove into if it hadn't happened to me. And we'll go into the story, but, for me, it was really educating myself to use the information myself, but not only to educate my clients on it. And it's kind of an untapped market that I've realized a lot of females aren't that in tune with their body and they don't know specifically how to train because they definitely train different than males or there's different considerations. Like even as a trainer, there's certain things that you potentially want to do with your females at different times of the month or different ways to even incorporate their nutrition as well.
And I love to get into that. But, what I love too, Kelsey, is, sometimes the clubs in general, I'm going to lump Lifetime into the club industry. Trainers get a bad rap. And I always say we are unique. And I know there's good trainers everywhere, but someone with your knowledge and your drive and dedication to understand how to, really isolate into a demographic to go after, but then continue your education. It's one of the what I always call the 5 fundamentals. So I can't thank you enough for one, being part of Lifetime and then doing what you're doing to reach as many people as you can. So I would love for you to just dive into your story. How did you get involved in fitness? And then how did you get involved in, really finding that passion towards training females?
Yeah, so it started back in college. I actually went to St. Ben's. I'm from a small town in St. Cloud. And I was pre-physical therapy, had every intention to go to physical therapy school at St. Kate's. And I ended up getting into their PTA program. But, I had applied for my first job at LA Fitness, and it was only supposed to be for a 3-month stint. I was only supposed to be there for the summer and then go to school in the fall. Well, I fell in love with the training aspect of it, and I had always been an athlete growing up, but I really found that I liked the exercise portion of it. So I was like, I wasn't having a huge pull to go to school, so I decided, well, I'm going to stick out and be a trainer because I absolutely love it. And I had been with LA Fitness for about a year and a half, really kind of learned a lot of the basics. I had a lot of good mentors even there because I was very fresh out of college. I only knew kind of the running side that I had done in college and then a little bit of the weightlifting side, but nothing kind of in between. And then I was looking for something new, and I had done a small independent gym that had worked with the internal health aspect as well. And I was there for about a year and a half. I was the only trainer there. I was able to kind of learn from them from a medicine standpoint as well, but then also dive into the nutrition piece. At the same time, I really got into bodybuilding at the time for women's figure, and I was getting ready for my first show, and I kind of used that information that I had learned to also bring in with the nutrition piece, which kind of really was my driving factor. So kind of fast forward a little bit, I was there for a year and a half, and then I actually had joined Lifetime after coming back from the vacation with our coach from down in Florida, just needing a new, scenery, new equipment, things like that. So we had joined Lifetime, and a couple of the trainers at the Savage location were like, "Kelsey, we know you're a trainer. Like, if you're looking, we would love to have you." And I was like, I don't really know if I want to get back into a corporate setting. So it took me about 3 or 4 weeks to decide if I actually was going to jump on board. And I had told the manager at the time that, my current job is going to allow me to do my precision nutrition certification. If you guys can allow me to do that and pay for that, I will come on board. So they were like, done deal. So I had
great investment, Mr. Manager. Great investment.
Yeah. And I had big aspirations. Like, nutrition was my passion. So when I had actually come on as a trainer, I was 4 weeks out from my first show. And it was great. It was a lot of work, but I told him, like, straight out of the gate, I was like, these are my aspirations. I want to do something with the nutrition program. Lifetime at the Savage location didn't have a nutrition program, so they kind of mentored me into that. And I bring up the bodybuilding part of it as well, is because that plays the next role in my story. So jumped in, though, into the nutrition program coordinator role, had really turned and built the program here. Because at the time I was like, okay, well, exercise is really important. I talked to a lot of females and a lot of clients that didn't know nutrition. They've always been on a diet. So I was like, how do we make this super, super simple and make it a lifestyle change for them? So it was really just educating them. And then I really believed in supplements, is that they were a big help for me in my journey. That's kind of like my story with Lifetime, just how I got here. But if we go into the bodybuilding part of it, that's kind of where it stemmed as well.
Well, and that was what I was going to ask, is so that was all what you just described was pre-bodybuilding, or you were doing that alongside of it. Okay. And so, so then now you started getting into bodybuilding, and what happened?
So, if you've ever done bodybuilding in the past, it's a lot of times like you get super, super lean, calories start to drop, you're in the gym pretty much all the time, like you're putting your body through the ringer. And I had only competed for 2 years, but in that 2 years I had done one show, and then I took like a 3-month off season, and then I competed for an entire year. And I sat relatively lean the entire time. So I didn't have a chance to give my body really the break it needed. And being a female, that's really quite important. And I say that because after my third show, I noticed in the off season, like, we were dropping my calories, we were like upping my cardio, and I was not seeing changes. I was gaining weight. I could tell something was off. I had lost my cycle the entire time, which, if you don't know, that's a big sign for females, saying like they're healthy. So I noticed that was part of it. My hair was super dry, like dry skin. I wasn't sleeping well. I had a lot of cravings. So I knew something wasn't right, and I wasn't exactly sure which avenue to go. So I had gone into my normal physician. I just told her some of my signs and symptoms, and she's like, Kelsey, I think your hormones are off. And I'm like, I'm 25, 26, like, okay. Well, I found out that all of my hormones are basically non-existent.
What do you mean by that?
Like,
for those that...
So there's a baseline between progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone that every person has, that their body functions properly at. Mine were literally 0 across the board. I didn't have any of them.
Wow.
And obviously, as a female, you definitely need estrogen and progesterone for us to even menstruate. And, if you want to have kids or carry a baby, like, you wouldn't be able to, because you physically don't have that. And I wasn't able to gain muscle either, because I didn't have any testosterone. So it didn't matter what I was doing out on the fitness floor either. And all of those, that's a huge stress on the body. So that can play a role in your adrenals and your thyroid. So all of the signs and symptoms were playing potentially to one of those signs as well. So after I had done that, the doctor was like, tell us, like, you really need to dive in. And I had kind of a half mindset of, okay, yeah, you're telling me to eat more and to probably reduce my exercise, because I was lifting 6 days a week, not eating a ton, but 1,300, 1,400 calories and I'm only 5'1", so it was like I thought that was normal. It wasn't. And then after that, I had, while I was doing the NPC, I had really kind of talked to Julie Brown at the time. Mandy Rosser was one of the RDs that I had worked with, and I had got my all-in-one lab test done through LifeTime. So I found out some of the food sensitivities that I had that were causing extra inflammation on the body, because your body is much smarter than you think it is, or even you perceive it as, where if you're eating foods that potentially are causing any sort of inflammation, that's a stress. If you're not getting sleep, that's a stress. If you're not recovering, that's a stress. If your hormones aren't working properly, that's a stress. So you've got all these.
If you're working out too much, it's a stress.
Yeah. See, and people use that as like, hey, this is a stress reliever. Well, working out is a stress on the body. And so if you have all this, your body's like, hold up, it's an unsafe environment. I'm going to preserve what I can to basically make you survive. Where you get some of those signs and symptoms. So for me, it was, okay, some of the foods I was eating, my cortisol, which is like the stress hormone, was really high, and then my hormones. So I worked for, it's been 2.5 years of kind of implementing something that we would do, whether it was a supplement, whether it was different nutrients that I needed, potentially a couple of different, I wouldn't say medications, but supplements too, for females specifically, really reducing my workouts. Instead of working out 6 days a week, I went down to 3, and it was low intensity, which, coming from a mindset of like, hey, you got to do all this all the time, that was the hardest thing for me. So it took about 2.5 years, and I had to go through a phase where, I had to gain body fat. I had to increase my calories. It was really uncomfortable. It got way worse before it got better. And the big thing for me was, after that entire time, was actually getting my cycle back. And it's been super regular for the past year, but I know if I go too low in calories, if I do too much exercise or strength training or cardio, or if I don't get the recovery, I'll notice it right away. And that's something that a lot of females, even, I would say just people in general, are not very in tune with their bodies.
Yep. What would you say too, how was your mental health when, and just, feelings of depression potentially, and I'm not saying, but I know that obviously hormones are out of whack. You have a harder time dealing with those things.
So it was, I would say my anxiety was much higher. I already am more of a type A personality, where I'm already a little bit more stressed out, anxious, and it kind of made it worse. I noticed, like, living in Minnesota, the winter time was probably, that was the beginning of it, and that was the hardest, because there wasn't a ton of sunlight. So like, I made sure.
Or you're just seeing -22 on your car dash, and
that too. But I made sure, like, in that time, like, to take my vitamin D, make sure, like, they talk about those happy lamps. I didn't think that it worked at all. I was like, there's no way. And that actually got me through it. But it was a really hard time, but I had a lot of good supportive people around me. And just as like a bodybuilder, if you've ever gone through it, especially as a female, you're super, super lean. So you think that's normal. And then you have to slowly gain weight, and you're like, okay, well, now am I gaining too much too soon? And it's like, no, that's actually super healthy. So it plays a big role too mentally, where it took me about a year just to feel comfortable even in my own skin again, where it wasn't like, I wasn't sitting at 10% body fat year round.
Yeah. And I guess that's, that also, like you said, it becomes kind of the norm. And then when you start to come back to what would normally be considered normal, if that makes sense, it almost messes with your head, because you're like, oh, I'm getting bigger, I'm getting fatter, or whatever the case may be.
Yep.
Man.
And, I even thought, like, when you talk about that, like, normal, like, even some of the signs and symptoms I was going through at the time, like, I was just so used to them. So they became my normal. And I didn't know how good I could feel till things were actually humming correctly. I mean, I think about right now, I'm eating the most amount of calories I've ever ate. I'm working out 4 days a week, and I'm actually gaining muscle, and I look leaner than I did when I competed. So it's just, you can kind of tell like when things are just humming and your body's happy,
Yeah.
how much it can actually really affect like your outcomes or your,
Yeah.
your outside physical health.
It is, and so one of the things I want to talk about is, so often I'm seeing it, and it kind of, I've seen it over the years, and I've seen it kind of come down, and now I'm seeing it quite a bit right now, is it's only calories in and calories out. And, if you just drop your calories, I want to try to keep it simple. Now, something that you said a minute ago, or 5-10 minutes ago, you said you want to keep it simple, but your simple isn't as simple as calories in and calories out. Would you mind going into that?
Yeah, and I think calories in, calories out is like, you have to be in some sort of a deficit for weight loss. Whether you're trying to lose weight, you have to be in a deficit. If you're maintaining, you have to eat the same amount of calories. If you're trying to gain, you have to gain or eat more calories. But when it comes down to it, if something internally is off, it doesn't matter what happens. I mean, because if you're, let's say, and we see it all the time, and I don't mean to pick on females, but we see it a lot of times with them where they're like, I'm going to eat 1,200 calories. And they've been on this diet for so long where they should be in a calorie deficit, but is their body so stressed out that it's like, hold up, like you're not eating enough, you're not feeding me, you're not getting into that maintenance mode. So I need to hang on to everything. And I'm not going to let you lose weight. So it's not as simple as calories in, calories out, because you've got all these outside factors like, how is your home life? How is work? How are your kids? With the pandemic going on, like all of that plays a big role in it. Like, are you getting enough sleep? Are you recovering? Like, your body can only handle so much before it's just like, this isn't working.
Yep.
So I don't think it's as simple as when trainers are like, hey, it's calories in, calories out. Yes, there's a time and place. If everything is optimal and your internal health is great, then yeah, it could be as simple as that.
But who is that, right? Especially nowadays, there's no way. Like, who is that? Show me that person. It's funny. Like, even today, I had my blood work done and had the reading this morning, and I would say probably the least stressed I've been in a long time working out. I did have an incident with my son where he had a pretty traumatic injury that had gone on. So that was a big stress, but it was crazy how low my testosterone dropped due to really what I was saying is probably not stress, but again, the traumatic issue was there, but just that one incident, everything else is great. And how much it drops, and gained a little bit of weight, and cholesterol started to get a little wonky. So, nobody's without stress.
Yeah, no, especially this year. I mean, this year has been probably the hardest on people physically and mentally. And we're kind of seeing that, just in the club here as well.
Got it. So I would love, for you to talk about, and putting you a little bit on the spot here, but it is obviously you have a system that you've been able to use to reproduce the results that you're getting with your clients. And, so much so you're going to have your own program soon, and super congratulations. And that's going to be awesome. But what is that system? Like how do you try to keep it simple, but still utilize, the testing and all of the other things within the program?
So a big thing for me is like, a lot of times I'll sit down with clients and we'll just talk basic nutrition. Like, a lot of people like, I'm not sure exactly what to eat. So like, what falls under protein category, carb category, fat category. So we just educate them from that point. That's how I like to work from it. And then it's, okay, these are some things that potentially, like if you have any inflammation or any foods that are causing some sensitivity, here are some swaps. What are some things that we look at from, a grocery store standpoint? But we utilize that, but then we talk about all of these outside factors and how they actually implement into their exercise and nutrition, where there's a third factor, that internal health. And a lot of clients that I talk to, like right out of the gate, if they've been doing things for a long time and they're just not seeing the results, a lot of times I'm like, what are you doing? And I ask a lot of like personal questions for females, like, you know, if you're menopause, like, are you having these hot flashes? Are you having cravings? Like, how is your sleep? Younger females, I'll ask them if they're on birth control, things like that, because all of that can affect kind of the chemistry that's going on in their body. So a lot of times, like, if they have a lot of the signs and symptoms, I always tell them, like, hey, you know, these are kind of my non-negotiables when I meet with clients. Like, let's not waste any time. Let's figure out what's going on internally, especially if you've never had it looked at. Like, I had a client the other day that, you know, she's 12 months after being pregnant and she's having some of these signs and symptoms. And, like, you know, have you ever had your hormones looked at? And she's like, no. And I was like, well, you know, you're kind of at that stage where potentially they're starting to normalize. If you've never had them looked at, it might be a good time because you had a lot of changes, you know, having the baby and then coming out of it.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
So I was just going to say, so a lot of times I'll recommend, like, you know, if we're going to do it, let's look at everything together versus just the hormone piece or just the stress piece or just the food piece. You've got to look at them all together because, you know, some of the foods could be causing extra stress on the body, which is that's causing stress on the hormones. Or potentially, is it because your hormones are low that your stress levels are high? Or is it potentially your, like, vitamin D, for example, or blood glucose level? Like, you've got to connect them one way or another. And then depending on what the results are from there, then we make some small adjustments.
And I think a lot of people, you know, we've talked about this on previous podcasts, but, you know, a lot of people don't understand the stress sex hormone balance in that one, it's their yin yang. As one goes up, the other goes down. So as stress goes up, your sex hormones go down, and those are the things that can help you combat the stress. So, you know, it's great. And I love that. This is what I mean. You know, I say the terms health and fitness professional. This is it. Like, you're it. And how you utilize those things. And that's what, you know, I got into a late, or I don't want to say it was late for me. It was probably 10 o'clock at night, Facebook rant. And I shouldn't have, but I did. And it was, you know, somebody saying it's just calories in, calories out. And, you know, I want to keep it simple in the beginning. And I'm like, how many times have trainers did that? The client spent, you know, $1,200, $1,500, $2,000 on training when they had signs and symptoms of something going on early on, you know, hormonally potentially, but maybe they didn't know. But now you just spent $2,000 for another $200 or $300 tacked on to that. I mean, I don't think that it's a number, but it's not a big number in the grand scheme of the percentage that we can weed some of this stuff out right from the beginning. And
Well, I was going to say, and I think part of it too, like, as a trainer, and this is just my perspective and my opinion, but I think as a trainer, we ask a lot of times, like, okay, how'd the workouts go last week? Like, you know, were you sore? Like, did you come in? Yeah, that's great. But I think we need to also be asking them, okay, are you taking your supplements? Like, are you getting sleep? And, like, how was food this week? Like, did you get your protein in? Like, what are you struggling with this week? Because really, like, a lot of the clients we see, sometimes we might see them 3 hours a week, and that's, like, on the high end. Most of them we're seeing 1 or 2 hours a week. So that's a lot of time in between that they're not seeing us, and they need that accountability. So we should really be engaging and asking them, okay, how are you doing on all the hours that you're not in here? Because I think that's really what makes a good coach, and that's how you keep them going too. Because, like, oh, like, yeah, you know, it was a super stressful week. I didn't get any sleep. Okay, well, let's talk about how we can kind of optimize that this week for you, and giving them ideas, because that's what's going to take them further longer, and they're going to just feel better.
Well, and you know, the thing is too, is obviously, I think so many times, I think there's some trainers within Lifetime that sometimes say, oh, you're just trying to sell that thing, you know, that hormone test. No, like, never sell something you don't know how to use, you know? So if you don't know how to use it, then don't use it. But at the same time, it's such a powerful tool. And for members out there, you know, I would love for you to say, you know, ask, you know, and tell people that are out there maybe listening, is there's certain symptoms, obviously, that if you see these symptoms, it's probably going to be the recommendation up front, versus if you don't see those symptoms, maybe we don't need that. Let's get after it. Would you mind diving into what are those, you know, telltale symptoms that you would say, okay, I really think we need to do this test before we get going on your training?
I mean, like for a lot of times for me, it's like if they're having a lot of different cravings, that just comes down to like what nutrients are they getting. So look at their nutrition, because I don't think you can recommend any sort of lab even or that type of thing without looking at what they're actually doing, like what the whole nutrition and exercise looks like. But you know, a lot of times when I work with females specifically, it's more or less like the PMS symptoms. And that's, you know, like even with young females, like I'll ask them, like, you know, are you menstruating regular? And they're like, yes, no. Well, if they're not, that's a big sign for me. You know, if they're pre or post menopause, like, and they're having severe, you know, weight gain, or they're having the hot flashes or the cravings, or like, this sounds bad, but like super bad constipation, things like those all kind of tell me a little bit that potentially something hormonally is potentially going on. Same thing if, you know, I even look at females who are older, you know, their testosterone typically decreases really rapidly, and a lot of times they're more estrogen dominant. So like if we've tried everything and they're just not seeing results, then that's when I'm like, okay, like what's going on? And a lot of those clients and females are even on like hormone replacement therapy as well.
Yep.
And that's outside of my scope, but it's common when they say like, you know, I've tried all this stuff and I'm just not seeing it. And I see more and more of like the cravings, the PMS symptoms, you know, not sleeping well, all of those are signs that,
High stress.
hey, you know, something is potentially off.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, man, that is awesome. I would love to dive into, because I know that, in some conversations we've had prior to the episode, that there's very specific programming that you will use for females based on the time of the month, whether it's, I'd love for you to dive into some of that information.
So one thing I always tell females is like, if you're a normal menstruating female, typically you should have 4 different like weeks that you're going off of. And I mean that is because every single week your body is changing. So when we as trainers get our clients, especially females, on the scale, are we looking month to month versus week to week? Because if a female is in specifically the second half of their cycle, they're going to probably gain anywhere between 1 to 5 pounds. And if you're always putting your client on the scale at that time, they're probably going to get super defeated. So looking really month to month. And when we think about just the female cycle, and this is where I've done a lot of research on it because I had to do it for myself, where the first half of the cycle, which is day 1 to typically day 14, females are typically a 28-day cycle, okay? So that first half is typically when they're going to probably feel their best, okay? That's from the time they start their bleed till right before ovulation, where they're actually going to utilize carbs better too for exercise. So like if you have a client that you're kind of adjusting their nutrition, that might be a really great time to add in a little bit more carbs to them and or increase their training style. So like if you're going for PRs or 1 rep maxes, you might want to do that typically between like day 10 to 12. And that's also typically when they're the lightest. So if you want to get your client on the scale, do it then, because they're going to feel way better and they're going to be like, yes, I'm seeing changes. And then if you go into the second half, which is the luteal phase, from the time that they ovulate to the time that they get their period, typically is when they're going to potentially need a little bit more rest and digest, maybe a little bit lighter exercise. And this is not the case for every female. Some females will experience more of a change, and some females will not notice, but most females just haven't really taken account and had to sync up with that.
Paid attention to it either, really.
Yep. And so like even that second half, we're a little bit more prone to injury as well. So like if you're trying to go for 1 rep maxes, they just might not be feeling. And that's like, if you're working with a female and you're like, hey, like, 2 weeks ago, you did 10 pounds more than you did this week. Like going on, especially from a male perspective. I don't think enough males are educated on that part of it, where they should be able to adapt a little bit their training to their female clients. The other thing is the second half of that cycle too. Females are typically use fat actually for energy source. So females who are getting like really bad cravings, or they're a little bit like they notice that their blood sugar level tanks, it's not uncommon. Like their body can't really use carbs that well. So actually increasing their fat during that time and decreasing their carbs might be a good option. And they're actually burning too, with just how the body's different adjustments in hormones. They're burning an extra 100 to 300 calories as well during that time. So some people can use that as a dieting tool. Like if you're trying to get leaner, hey, use that. But maybe your clients also potentially need that extra 100 calories because they're burning a little bit more, and they just notice that they're a little bit more fatigued. They need a little bit more rest. They need a little bit more recovery time. You need kind of to adapt to your normal client.
Wow. That is some fantastic information. So, I also know now that you're going to be getting your own virtual program. Is that something we could talk about yet? Or,
It's in the works. There's nothing set in stone, but really just more or less trying to educate people from a nutrition side of it. So doing more of like the virtual nutrition with the programming as well for exercise, just because I think it's a really untapped market where a lot of people have questions on nutrition. They need that accountability, they need that kind of that education. That's kind of my insight, and that's something that we're working at. Nothing set in stone yet, but
awesome.
That's my vision, is trying to educate as many people from the nutrition side and the hormone and female training side as possible, because I don't think there's enough of that in this industry. And for me, we talked about education. Continuing education, that's what keeps trainers motivated and loving their job. Like I know I have to do that just for my own self, but also I bring that to my clients, and my clients love that I'm learning for them, because in this industry, we know things are forever evolving. So what worked 15 years ago potentially isn't the same now. So I think as trainers, we also have to adapt our styles and really even educate ourselves for our clients too.
It's it. I say this all the time. The more you know, the more you realize you don't know. And then the second one is what's right today is wrong tomorrow. What's wrong tomorrow is right today. And, it evolves. It just evolves. I mean, we talked before about using an e-stim machine to work out. Like it's nuts. Like it's just nuts. So technology and knowledge and how the body's working is just, it's not only always changing, but it's changing at a rapid pace.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I can't agree with you more. And I always say, two of the things you just brought up, which again personifies my point of the 5 fundamentals of a successful trainer, is one, they have a vision. You had a vision, you just mentioned it. And 2, you continued your education. And it's just, those are just 2 of the things you have to do in this industry if you truly want to call it a career, which is obviously what I think you and I both, feel that we're trying to do. Well, this was awesome. And, I would love anything else you want to share, that we haven't discussed, you want to share with the audience.
I mean, I think like, if you are struggling, like reach out, ask for help. That's what the trainers are here for. Like if they don't know, they'll get you in contact with someone that does know, because there's a lot of information, and I think that's the cool thing about all trainers too, is they each have their own niche. Like I will say like Pilates, not my niche. Like I know where my lane is, and I know like potentially more the female hormones, nutrition. That's what I'm really good at. There are other people out there that are awesome at programming and, different types of lifts and that type of thing. So find the person that connects with you the best too. And really just also, I would say, if you haven't, start taking account of like how your body's feeling, because potentially how you're feeling right now too is like your normal, because it's been like that for so long. But take into account like maybe how much better you could feel if you make some slight adjustments as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. And, the other thing too, I want to give you huge props for is, knowing, knowing that and not feeling like it's a competition. Because I'm sure if there's something that somebody wants and you're not it, then you'll pass it on and you'll get that reciprocated. And that's the beauty of, a great culture at a great club and environment as well.
When I think even that, like too, like a lot of clients potentially have 2 or 3 trainers that they're working with.
Yeah.
Where, maybe they have one that does their exercise, maybe one that helps with nutrition. They've got more eyes and accountability on them, and they're getting different perspectives, which I think is great for the client because they're also hearing kind of the same things from from a couple of different people, which we all need to hear a couple of things over and over to make sure that it sticks. So if you're hearing the same thing from a couple of people, it's probably going to stick.
And I argue it's not even necessarily stick. I was the guy, I'd buy a book. I got a library bigger than I know what to do with. And I remember looking at books and putting it down. And then 5 years later, coming back to that same book, reading that and going, I don't remember that it said that. And sometimes it's the timing. I always say, everyone says, this is the best book. The best book is really the best book hitting you at a spot where you're at in your life, and it's the best book because of that. So sometimes my best book right now is not going to be your best book right now.
Exactly.
But it's just continue on and keep moving forward and use the skills that you have. And, I am super proud of you and super grateful to be able to record this podcast and get your word out there. And I know, obviously whether you're at Savage Lifetime in Minnesota or you're across the world, I mean, Kelsey's somebody you want to work with, with our virtual membership and the ability to train online, you can get Kelsey wherever the heck you're at. So
I have a couple of clients I do nutrition coaching with right now, and it's a great tool. So utilize what we have, and the digital platform is awesome.
Yeah. And I have in the show notes, I'll have your links and your bio and how to find all that other stuff too. So I cannot thank you enough. This has been awesome information, and hopefully we get that word out and share that sucker out there, both from a member and a trainer standpoint, because your story is exactly what we're looking for within the Lifetime culture and just in the industry to elevate the industry up. So thank you.
Thank you, Jason, for having me. I really appreciate it.
No problem. You have a great day.
Thanks, you too. Goodbye.